Imagine designing a modern website and you want a background that is visually appealing and unique. Well, in this case, CSS Gradients are the perfect solution. Welcome back to Code Dev Academy. In today's video, we're going to dive into CSS Gradients, and we're going to discuss both on linear gradient and radial gradient. And we're going to work on practical experiments, and I'm going to show you everything you need to know about them, how linear gradient works and also how radial gradient works. So if you're ready to level up your skills, let's get started. So as you can see, this is the box I'm having here with a background color of red, and I made it a display flex and place item center, and I gave it a width. And quick before we start, I want you guys to take note of this. Linear gradient is considered as image. So it's either you use the background image property or you just use the background property. Anyone you choose is going to work. And we are going to look into two types of gradient, the linear gradient and the radial gradient. But first we are going to start with the linear gradient. So the first thing I'm going to do now, since we are starting with the linear gradient, I'm going to take this my background color here, and it's either I leave it like this or I insert an image just like this. Anyone I do is going to work, but for this let me just leave it to be background. So the first thing I'm going to do is to write linear gradient. That's the first thing you do, and you throw some colors there. And make sure anytime you're dealing with this kind of situation, make sure you're using two or more colors, because a single color is not going to work. So let me show you a demo of what I'm talking about. So the moment if I write red here, and the moment you write your first color, you must separate them with commas. So let me write red, comma, blue. And if I save here, now I'm going to be having a color of red and blue of my gradient here. And linear gradient by default, it comes from top to bottom. That's how it comes. So if you look at my screen right now, red is the one starting on top, then it started coming down, then it started changing to blue. So this is what I mean by it starts from top to bottom. And apart from just having two colors of red and blue, I can also add multiple colors. So what I'm going to do is just give a comma, just put black, and put comma again, and put gray, put comma here, and put green. And if I save here, now I'm going to be having red, blue, black, gray, green, all the colors, and all it's going to work. So let me just take this back to the two colors we had before, because it will be much more easier for you to understand it. And apart from just having it to be, you can actually change the position you want it to go. If you look at it here, it's coming from top to bottom by default, which is from red to blue, but I can actually change it to be to left. So what you're going to do is just to put 2 here and put left. And don't forget about your comma. You must give your comma to left. And if I save here, now I'm having from left to right. And then apart from left, you can also change it to top, left, left, top, and it's going to work. Now you're having it to be this, and change it to bottom. And it's also going to work. It depends on the position you want it to go to. I'm using words here because for demo purposes, but you can actually use RGB, you can use RGBA, you can use hex, you can use SSL, all it's going to work. Another thing I want you to know about this linear gradient is you can actually choose the space you want it to consume. So let's assume I want red to consume 50% of red. So all I'm going to do now is after writing your color, then you're going to write 50%. Then now you're going to be having red to consume 50% of this your box. And if you look at it, this is actually what we are having. Now red is consuming 50% of the box, then it started blending to blue. You see now I'm having red to consume 50% of this my box, and I can also change it to 10%. It's going to contain only 10% of my box. But what if I make this to be, let's say my blue to consume 50% of it? Now I'm having my blue to consume 50% of this my box, and red is only consuming 10% of this box. And one thing I want you guys to take note, now if I change this my red here to be 50% of the code of the box, I'm now going to be having a solid color. There isn't any transition, there isn't any blending that's happening here. My red is containing complete 50% of the box, and blue is containing complete 50% of the box. The reason this is happening here, the reason we are not seeing any transition, we're not seeing any blending, is because when the red color stopped at 50%, the blue color picked it up from 50%. So as it being we have some space here, so let me take this blue to be, let's say, 80%. Then what's the difference between 80 and 50? That's literally like 20%, right? That's 20%. Now the box is going to use 20% to blend these two colors. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. As you can see here, now it's only using 20% here to blend these two colors. If I decide to reduce this to, let's say, 30%, now it's going to use an additional 20% to also use it to blend the two colors. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If you notice here, now the blending has increased. So let me take this red to be 10% and take blue to be 10%. Now red is only going to consume 10% of the box, and blue is also going to consume 10% of the box. The rest of the percent is going to be used for blending the two colors. Now this is what we are seeing here. I want blue to be 90, not 10. Now I'm having 10% here. If you notice here, this is actually where the red color stopped. From here it started blending. And for the blue, this is actually where it stopped. From here it started blending. So I'm only having my blue consuming 10% and red consuming 10%. The rest here are just blending. If you notice here, you're seeing blue color inside red color. So it's actually just transition. It's blending it. But I can also make it to be, let's say, my 50% red and 50% blue. So the moment blue stopped at 50%, red picked it up from 50%. That's why we are not seeing any transition, we're not seeing any blending. It's solid blue and solid red. But to show you how this second gradient works, which is radial gradient, which is not linear gradient, radial gradient, what it does is, if you notice for this linear gradient, when I started here, it was coming from top to bottom, that I even gave it a to left, and it was going from left to right. But in this case, what radial gradient does is, it's not from top to bottom, it starts from a cycle. So let me take off this linear and put radial here, radial just like this, and I save. Now we're going to be having a cycle. It's not coming from top to bottom, it's starting from a cycle and it's expanding. If you look at it very well, this is actually what we're seeing. But let me show you a clear example by adding some colors here. So let me just make this a black, a green, a comma, gray. Don't forget to be putting your commas, if not, it's not going to work. And if you look at it now, this is actually what we're having. Now it's a small cycle to a larger cycle. It started from red, it came to blue, black, green, gray. This is actually how it works. And I can also give these colors a percent. So let me assume I'm giving this red a 10%. I want it to consume 10% of the box. Let me assume the red, I'm giving it to consume 20% of the box. 20%, and let me give the black to contain 30%, and green to consume, let's say, 50%, and let's say gray to consume 80%. And we're going to be having a percent consumed by these colors. And this is actually what we are having. We're having red consuming just 10% of it, blue to consuming 20%, and black to consuming 30%. So as green, so as green. But there's another thing I want to show you, which is repeating gradient, which is repeating linear gradient. You can actually use it for repeating linear gradient, and you can actually use it for repeating radial gradient. It depends on the one you want. But in this case, let me start by using it for the radial gradient. So what we're going to do is just type repeating, and give it a dash. That's all you need. So the moment I save here, now we are going to be having it to be repeating, as the name goes, repeating radial gradient. Now it's going to be repeating. I can change this to, let's say 5%. 5%. Now everything now is going to be repeating. But let me actually change this to linear gradient so that you can actually see it in a clear way. Let me put it back to be linear gradient. Now if you notice, this is actually what we're having, and let me take the percent off so that you can see it repeating. Now if you look at it, what is actually happening, it's actually now repeating my colors here. That's what the repeating does. It repeats the color several times. If I give this, let's say, of 10% here, now I'm having it to be repeating the red by 10%. So you can actually use this repeating linear gradient for the radial, and you can use it for the linear gradient. So I believe that's actually how linear gradient works. And apart from also percent, you can actually give it a degree. So let me just put like a 90 degree here, and don't forget to put your comma. Now I'm having a 90 degree color that is appearing here. So let me take the rest of this color off, leave red and blue. Now you're having 90 degree base that is consumed by this red. You can also change it to 40, let's say 40 degrees. Now you're having 40 degrees, you can change it to 10 degrees. It depends on how you want it to be. You can change it to 20 degrees and it's going to work. You can change it to 50 degrees and it's also 25 degrees and it's also going to work. I believe that's all for linear and radial gradient, and I hope you have actually gained something out of this video. Please like this video, and if you want to join us in this journey of exploring the world of CSS, then subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. We shall meet in the next